Hello and welcome to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. We're here to explore the intricacies of leadership, explore the science behind it, and hopefully learn a few things along the way. I developed the Pivot framework to help change work environments for the better. Pivot uses neurological science to help leaders understand their colleagues and analyse their own feelings and responses. All in all, we aim to enhance mental well-being, improve performance, and benefit everyone involved. So what does pivot mean? To pivot, you need perseverance, inclusion, value, optimization, and trust. With my guests, we'll unpick these principles and discuss how each one is vital in building strong leaders. On today's episode, we're discussing trust. Trust is an essential part of an effective team. It provides a sense of safety, and when your team members feel safe in their work environment and with each other, they feel comfortable to open up. They feel secure enough to expose vulnerabilities and, when appropriate, take risks and get out of their comfort zone. So what can leaders do to ensure their teams feel safe, secure and valued in the workplace? To join me in talking about trust is someone who's naturally curious about people and what they can achieve, what normal everyday humans are capable of given the right opportunities, training, experiences and environment. My guest today has worked extensively in learning and development for over 2 decades. She was a senior at the Entertainer Toy Store for 23 years, supporting all aspects of business, both in the UK and abroad. In 2022, she transported her wealth of knowledge and expertise to Oxygen Activeplay, where she now works as their people director. Alongside this, she's on the board of governors for Captiva Ltd, where she supports the business from a corporate and employer perspective. She's a fantastic colleague, a voice of experience, and an expert in helping people reach their full potential. In short, the ideal person to talk to about trust. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Peta Young. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited about this episode. It's the last one in the framework, so we've done a full kind of loop of the pivot principles. And I know it's going to be kind of a great first finale for our first round. We're going to be discussing trust today and how this benefits companies and the leaders and the people that work within it, and how we can help people feel safe at work and how we can develop that trusting environment to boost productivity. So before we get into the topic, I think my listeners would just love to know how you got into what you do now.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. And I think, you mentioned it in the intro there about being curious about people. And I think if I go right back to the beginning at university and I was doing a business degree and I was thinking about what are the bits that really interest me, it was anything that was to do with humans. Why are they behaving? How are they behaving? How is that affecting how other people behave and what it takes to succeed and grow and develop? So I learned quite early on that my good for the soul moments come from when other people achieve and when they do things, whether that's running a training course and someone learns how to delegate for the first time, or when you see people's careers kind of flourish and grow in front of you. That's how I knew I wanted to work in the people arena, whatever industry that's in. That's kind of secondary, really, for me. It's all about the people that I'm working with and supporting.
Yeah. And I think that does actually ooze out of you whenever I'm with you. We always kind of meet at that level, don't we? About, why are they doing that? Why are they doing what they're doing? And it's so interesting. And then we have a good old debate about that. So yeah, that curiosity is key, I think, in the people space. So looking back on your career in L&D, do you have any kind of high points that you can really reflect on?
Yeah, plenty of high points and plenty of low points. And when I was thinking about this, there's lots of things you can count as successes, real high points in your career, whether it's promotion, whether it's an event, whether it was, somebody growing in front of you. But actually, I think it's probably a lot of the mistakes that I've made. And I think, when I was thinking about trust and I was thinking about what does that mean in the workspace and some of the other stuff we'll come on to, for me, mistakes is huge because when you reflect and when you look back, if you were allowed to make those mistakes, and I've made plenty, they're really great opportunities to learn from. But where you've made mistakes and you've been made to feel guilty or inadequate, you learn less, the organisation learns less. So when I was thinking about my successes, I went on a training course years ago called Skills with People, run by an absolute guru in communication called Alex Gould. And I remember coming out of that really uncomfortable 4 days of constantly being on the receiving end of feedback and giving feedback. And for me, the thing that came out of that, and I've tried to carry it through, is to be honest. And I think when I reflect back on what's worked and what hasn't worked for me and for others that I've been with, it's where I've not been honest and what I've needed and what I've wanted. And either I haven't been brave or vulnerable enough, or on reflection, the environment wasn't safe enough. There wasn't enough trust to be honest about what was needed and what I wanted. So when I was thinking about, I thought about, I could talk about this conference or I could talk about that event, but actually it's more about mistakes. I think definitely coming back to the ones that I've really learned from and then help push you forward, and also supporting other people when they go through the same mistakes or similar mistakes in their journeys.
Yeah, yeah. So I like how we're starting out, thinking about trust in leadership, and we're always working at trying to build it and rebuild it, because we know we can't always keep it. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do that. But starting with mistakes, that's like an interesting angle to kind of come in on it, isn't it? Because usually we try and build trust from, and I think leaders fall into trying to build trust from a place of, I've got this, I'm role modeling all the great stuff. And actually, if we start from, I'm human, I've made mistakes, that's like a really interesting place to start, isn't it?
Well, I just think we're human. And if you're always trying to deal with what's good, what's the end goal, it's almost like you're just going to be chasing that quite a lot. But if you start with, I'm a little bit vulnerable, I don't always get it right, you don't always get it right, for me, that's a good leveler. Because whether you're a senior leader, whether you're a middle manager, junior manager, or team member, everybody is going to get things wrong. That's inevitable. That's absolutely inevitable. So I think for me, if you can start with admitting what's gone wrong and what you've learned from it, then I feel like getting yourself on board, your teammates and kind of people that are working for you on board, it feels like a nice thing to do. And certainly when I reflect back on good leaders and bad leaders, the good ones in my life and my career have always been super honest about, well, that didn't go to plan, did it? Right, so what do we do now and how do we pick ourselves up and move forward?
Yeah, yeah. And classic pivot, right? So yeah, that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
we probably don't realize it until we actually look back on it. So you mentioned really good communication training there. So I'm up for bigging up good stuff that's out there for our listeners to kind of tap into. So who was that? Sorry, Alex. Was it Alex?
So Alex Gould, it's Gould Training. So yeah, he runs it's sort of a 6-month program. Again, it's not just a kind of a 2-day course, bang, and you're out again. So there's some individual coaching that happens, and he gets you to reflect a lot on conversations that haven't gone well and owning your behaviour. And, I was using either begging or sarcasm, and neither were working for me, surprisingly. So yeah, we work quite a lot on being honest and being vulnerable and just being on a level, whether you're asking up, across, or down in terms of what you need, and balancing assertion and empathy. And the 2 skills that I've carried with me throughout my career. So yeah, Alex Gould definitely deserves a mention. So thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll try and get a link for the show notes. Yeah, that'd be cool. So there's some nuggets there, and you've shared some gold about your own feedback there around communication to build trust. And so, there's lots of lovely things that came out of that around being brave, vulnerable, and having a safe enough environment. So that's really cool. And then balancing this empathy and assertion thing. That's interesting, isn't it? How do we do that? On the topic of trust, like for you, what does trust mean for you?
For me, there's 3 key things in terms of trust. One is about relationships. So you need that 2-way trust between the teams and the people that you work with. Environment has a lot to do with it in terms of the safety aspect, and then experiences. So being able to reflect back on what's worked and what hasn't. So, with relationships, I've always think there's a bit of a fallacy that the more senior you are, it's different for you in terms of what you need from work. And I don't buy into it at all. I think what I want out of a job and what I want out of an environment and my relationships and experiences are the same as the people that work in my team or the people that work in the parks. So whatever the relationship is, whether it's teammate, colleague, boss, etc., is, can I be honest with you? Are you going to be honest with me? And can we share stuff? So whether it's our successes, our fails, our learnings, whatever it is, for me, it's that honest and openness between people. And then the environment is what the senior leadership team are responsible for. I mean, it's a collective responsibility, but in terms of setting the tone, so, how we behave is absolutely reflective, and are we doing what we say we're going to do, and are we communicating regularly? And even when the answer's no, or the answer's, it's not going to happen, I still think people are asking the question, they want the answer, not necessarily, they're not going to get the answer they always want. So I think that's, being honest in your communication. And then in that field of experiences, we're all going through life. We've all got a career, we've all got work, we've all got life outside a career. And I think making sure that it's not always transactional, that we know a little bit about each other. And obviously that will decrease and increase depending on the exposure to each other. But again, the more human you can be with anybody that you're dealing with, I think helps with trust. So yeah, relationships, environment, experiences for me were the three elements that I thought if you take out one of those, trust is going to suffer.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really nice triangle, isn't it, of three things that you can kind of think about balancing in your approach to building trust. I like that. I also like your myth busting about, as you kind of creep up the leadership ladder, that suddenly you don't have those same needs as everyone else anymore. You suddenly become like this corporate robot that everyone does. I was just giggling to myself because I think I fall into that trap myself of thinking that about certain people. You can't help it. Or when I've been in roles or I go in to facilitate leaders, people often feel that about me, is that I'm not actually that human because I'm there doing this very serious role. But actually, we do have those basic needs, and sometimes it comes down to that experience and it just being fun, right? I need a bit of fun in my day, and that helps me what I'm doing. Yeah.
I've worked in organizations where they talk about continuous learning and moving forward, and then when you're trying to provide learning experiences to senior leaders, like no, we don't need that. Well, it's like, well, you're not going to get the trust out of your middle managers and your heads of department and your team members who will be beavering away and learning and having new experiences, and then you're not doing the same. And also you get stuck, and then people see you being stuck. So I think everybody needs to move forward. Even if you're in the most senior position, you've still got more to learn, you've still got more to do. And that's true of your experiences. You're still going to get things wrong, you're still going to get things right. So yeah, I think it is a big fallacy that, in fact, you probably, certainly true of me, you check yourself more because you're just that bit more exposed. So, because more people can see what you get wrong and what you get right. So, and again, I think that helps build trust when you're talking to people who might be earlier on in their journey, just to kind of say, these are some of the things that I've got wrong in my career, or these are some things I've got wrong this week. Definitely helps that.
Yeah. And when we lead change, right? Because, Pivot is kind of the program set up to support leaders with leading change, and with the trust element, I think, it's really easy to break that trust, not on purpose, obviously, but by accident, by changing in the environment happening, and then people are questioning their relationships within that environment. So I think that being open in that, like, this isn't working, we need to change this, or pivot in a new direction kind of thing, is super, super important. But often we freeze and go, oh, we're changing direction, and we're not going to actually talk about what went wrong there. We're just going to keep going because we want to keep the corporate front. And, that isn't very authentic, is it? So yeah, I love everything that you're saying there. So in terms of what trust looks like at an employee level, what are you kind of seeing in your teams? Talk about the workforce that you've got, because I love the unique workforce that you have. And I think our listeners would be keen to hear about your workforce, because they're the workforce of the future. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, they just.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got, all in, there's about 850 of us. And the large majority of those guys are 16 to 21. So we're first jobs for a lot of people, young people, young adults who are coming into the workforce, whether it's weekend work while they're still in education, or even while they're trying to figure out what to do, or they've been with us a little while and really enjoy the active nature of the role and helping kids party, jump, climb, play. And then we've got, supporting our 13 parks across the country, we've got quite small central functions, about 25 of us. And then again, everything from sort of 25, I want to say 55 is probably the stretch of our teams, but really, really young workforce who know what they want, who are really open in talking about what they want from an employer. Their number one benefit request is support with mental health. They really know themselves, and they're very, very astute to the fact that they can go and get a job somewhere else. So you better look after me, and you better make sure that my day-to-day job is fun and interesting, and I'm being rewarded and paid fairly and looked after. And also they want to be heard. They absolutely want a voice and they want to influence how the business operates, what we stand for. And they've got a really, really strong sense of self and strong sense of purpose that they want to align to the business as well. So trust is a high demand for those guys. And they really, our park managers who can have anywhere between 50 to 90 people that they're responsible for with their really great management teams, they are demanding, but in a really good way, in a way that I never was at 21 years old, coming into full-time work. So I really respect. I think sometimes they get tarred with the entitlement brush sometimes. Not saying that doesn't exist, but I don't think it's as prevalent. I think they are curious and they are very clear about what they want.
Yeah. I think there's the entitled title that came with like millennials, but now we're into what we Gen Z now we're into, aren't we? That's what we're talking about here. So I think we're still quite behind because we're still talking about millennials in the workforce, and actually we've got past that now. We're now in a new space. But what was it you said? They're curious and clear. That's something that leaders need to get their head around. That these young people are curious about their opportunities in their future and what's in it for them. So they're demanding, but I think that's different to entitled, right? I think it's good. That's the positive slant, isn't it?
It is, and it takes away the guesswork.
Yeah.
You're not trying to figure out what's going to motivate them. You're not trying to figure out what's going to keep them employed. They're telling you, and you can either live up to it or you can't. Some of their demands aren't achievable. So, we're a living wage employer. We're not a minimum wage employer. We've been very clear in the last 12 months as we work towards becoming employer of choice. We've got to get the foundations right. And as an employer, we're trying to balance our offering because, we can't pay what some of the supermarkets pay, but we can offer lots of other things. But again, it's how you communicate with that group of people and so that they hear you and understand you. So we've figured out that text messaging is the way to do that. They don't really read emails, they don't do newsletters, they don't even do WhatsApp, but messaging is absolutely the way to get to them. So once you can get to them and talk to them, they can talk back to you. So yeah, that's what we're finding, but they are very clear in their expectations, which is good, I think.
Texting to build trust, that's like a great tip for
Isn't it?
organizations out there that will be having this kind of mixed generation in the workforce now, which is great, but it's like, how do we reach those groups to make sure that we're building trust? So that's a great, you're giving a great insight there. And I know you've done lots of other initiatives across the park. So in terms of like work that you might have done, can you think of some things that you've done across the workforce that you've seen has definitely felt like that's built trust, or you've got some evidence that that's built trust at work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any of it's groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it's doing it and then it's maintaining it and keeping it going. So we do a quarterly employee survey. We do a short 10 questions for 3 quarters of the year. And then the last quarter of the year is the big one where we really get some insight. And that taught us a lot about the teams, what they want, what they expect, and how they view the business and the senior leadership team. They were super clear in what they wanted, and we had some great participation. And actually, one of the key drivers for participation was we would donate to a charity that supports young people. So we supported Young Minds. And that was a key driver for them. It wasn't the incentive that you could possibly win an Apple Watch by taking part in the survey. Actually, they were really driven by the kind of giving back to the community. So we've kept that throughout the shorter surveys. And Support Pride Month, we're supporting the Proud Trust this month, which is lovely, actually. And we've also, when we bring our central team and our park managers together, we also bring in our junior management teams as well once a year. And we started talking to them about value creation incentives. So we're using this language as a senior team to drive and grow the business. And we wanted to bring them on board with that. And actually, when we talked to them about the 7 different VCIs that we're working towards as a business, and we got them to feedback instantly, there was some real gems and some real gold that we just hadn't thought of, because we're not dealing with customers every day. We're not dealing with staff concerns, worries and complaints. So actually, that was a real lesson, is that whatever's happening in the business, we need to make sure that we're bringing them along for the journey. So we're just about to launch what we're calling the Hero Collective. So this is a 12-month commitment. and it's been open to everyone in the business, from kind of crew members right the way through the parks at management level and in the central team. And we've got a team now of 17 that are going to be our board of brains for the next 12 months. So any initiative, whether it's pay, menu changes, products that we want to put in the park, our P&E director and IT director just come back from Thailand after going to Big Expo out there. So we've got some ideas of some new things we'd like to bring to the parks in the UK. So we'll make sure that the Hero Collective get to see it and get to feedback, so that we've got that eye and that voice of the business that has got those 16 to 21-year-olds in, that has got the central team in. One, to bring them together to build trust and build relationships, but also to really influence those value creation initiatives that we want to run out the business. So definitely making sure that they have a voice, one, that they're heard and contribute, and then two, that we feed back on what their ideas were, what we're implementing if we're not, why we're not, or that it's not happening yet. So they're kind of the key things, is making sure that they not only have a voice, but they know they've got one, and that we're constantly communicating back on what's happened. So still a bit of a work in progress, and we're just about to have our first Hero Collective session next week, but really looking forward to being challenged by that group of people.
It's like that reverse mentoring, isn't it, that's happening challenge, which is a lovely trust builder, and again builds the relationships, works on the environment and the experience, so your triangle coming through there. So that's really, really neat. Thanks for sharing that. So thinking about things like authenticity, empathy and logic, because we know there's a lot of research out there that shows that those three things are also great pillars, and they kind of link with your three nicely. I suppose we've talked about the workforce, but then we need this leadership team that are going to, if I'm a pivot leader and I need to demonstrate my leadership and build trust with the group like you've just described, how do you think that leaders can put their best foot forward with being authentic, demonstrating empathy, demonstrating logic, so they've got those good relationships?
I think you're always going to judge someone and know if they're honest or trustworthy if their words match their actions. For me, there's no model or formula. It is, if you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you're not, say why, be honest about why. So I think it's probably a bit of a short answer to quite an in-depth question, but I think for me it is, as leaders and as recruiters, we bring people into the business for their talent, their expertise and their potential. And if you don't let people deliver on that, if you micromanage, or if there's, certainly in the absence of trust comes blame, if you kind of blame people for getting things wrong or for why things aren't working, rather than having those discussions or talking about why it didn't work or talking about mistakes. And then there's all, as language moves on in leadership, people talk about failing mindfully, failing fast. It's just failing. Like, it's just, you don't need to put something after the word failing. It's like, it's gone wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it's just do what you say you're going to do, and then if it's gone well, talk about it so we can repeat success. If it hasn't gone well, let's talk about it so we can avoid it in the future. I feel like it's that simple. And then I think when that doesn't happen, people go quiet, and when people go quiet, you should know instantly. That should be a massive red flag for you as a leader, that if you're asking for feedback or you're not getting survey responses, or people don't want to join your employee forum, or you're going into parks or wherever you work and people don't want to talk to you, then there's a big trust issue, because you are not doing what you said you were going to do for those people.
Yeah. So I've got like a really nice 1, 2, 3. I made some notes there. So like, walk the walk, keep it real, and watch out for people being quiet. Are they quiet? Because we got to do something, right? So that's a really great 1, 2, 3 for people to start thinking about this, raising their awareness about what my trust might look like and what am I doing and what are other people doing. So that's really, really super helpful. So what difference do you think it really does make in the workplace? I'm going to tap into your heart neurons now, because I know you well, and I know this will come from the heart. What difference do you think it does actually make to have trust in the workplace, where people feel secure and enabled to do the great jobs that they're doing?
Yeah, for me, it's everything. I think if you don't trust the business and you don't trust your leaders or you don't trust the team that you're in, you're not going to enjoy being at work, which means you're going to give less naturally, because why would you put your energy into something that you don't feel is worthy, or that you're going to be recognized, rewarded, or whatever? And it's hard, having worked somewhere where there was a lack of trust because the blame culture was high. There's only so long you'll put up with it for. Those 16 to 21-year-olds won't. They will just vote with their feet and walk out the door. Millennials a little bit longer, us Gen Xers and Gen Ys probably longer than we should. But then it means you end up with a culture that just turns bad slowly. And it's almost like you can't quite put your finger on when it tipped because, people collectively are starting to feel that there isn't trust in the business or they're not feeling valued. But then things change and either, like we just said, people go quiet or people leave, or people leave mentally but stay, and then that's tragic. So for me, it's absolutely everything, and it's equal measures of challenge and support for trust. You need to support people when they're not at their best or the business isn't at their best to kind of get there. And then when we know things aren't right, whether it's on an individual level, team, or business level, we need to challenge and we need to feel comfortable enough and secure and safe enough to do that. So I think as long as you're asking questions and as long as people are asking questions of you, that's a really good sign that you've got the trust. If people just start agreeing or at worst being apathetic, then I think that's when you're in trouble. So for me, trust is everything. And I'd like to say that Oxygen's got a high trust environment. And you see that in the absence of things like micromanagement. You see that in they are a loud bunch at all levels. You know what they're thinking and feeling at all times. You see that because you don't feel stress at work. And you see that because of low staff turnover and people are being productive. So you have things that you don't need to measure by KPIs. It's, if as long as you're getting out and you're being amongst your people, I say that like I'm the Pope, but when you're spending time with people in their work environment, you can see it and feel it. So yeah, it's absolutely everything.
What would you say to organisations who are trying to make this transition to being brave? Because I see it a lot in my work and the different organisations that I go into. We want this voice and we want our employees to be demanding of us as leaders. But then when they are, we also get afraid of it. So then we start to close that down a little bit because it's a bit much, So for a leader to get comfortable with that uncomfortableness and cope with that, do you have any kind of tips? Because you've got to be quite brave, haven't you? But you've just talked about the benefits there of building trust. They're demanding of us, they're talking, it's noisy, they're giving us a lot to work with. Great, but I know some organisations will be like, I don't know if we can handle that. So can you give any kind of help around mindset or anything with that?
It's that old adage, and you see it on LinkedIn pop up as a meme constantly, where, the owner says, what if we invest in all this training and they leave? And then they come back is, what if we don't and they stay? And I think it's true of this, that you just have to do it. You've got to commit to it. It's not easy. It's incredibly uncomfortable, and you have to deal with the unknown. That's why you need pivot, because you don't know what's going to come back your way. And if you haven't been doing it before, if feedback isn't natural for an organization, then you've got to go back to the old Tuckman, and you've got to go through that storming. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to like it. They're not going to like it. They're not always going to be honest to start off with, because they're testing the water with you. So it's like any time you do a staff survey, the first one normally comes back really well. And then when they realize it is anonymous, then the second one's always a bit more brutal, because they go, I can be honest now. So I think it's about knowing that it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be a win-win straight away. And you as a leader, that's your job, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to start with before you expect it of your team members, and know that it's not a quick fix and it's not a quick win. The job for us now as a business is that, I'm sat here saying we've got a great culture. We definitely have to talk to the team, but what we're hearing back is largely that's true. As we get bigger, how do we keep that? Because again, there'll be that tipping point. So I don't have a triangle for that, and I don't have a magic formula. It is just a case of, if you're going to commit to it, come back to do what you say you're going to do, and know that it's going to be a process and a journey. And that, again, you need to feed back that, we've done this. Is it working well? How are people feeling about it? No, these are the bits we've got wrong. Okay, so how do we? And then it's a constant learning cycle. If it was easy, we wouldn't need leaders.
No, we won't be talking about this topic, would we? Exactly.
Yeah, we wouldn't need pivot programs. We wouldn't need, and I think that's why is that, get yourself a good coach, or get yourself a good leadership development specialist, or whatever it is you need to get you as a leader or a team of leaders through the process, and have somebody to guide you through it. Because if you haven't done it and you don't know what it looks like, have that support, definitely.
No, that's good. So it's like, be open it up, have the support though for what comes back, because what I'm hearing from you is it isn't easy, but it's valuable, isn't it? The only way we can build trust is if we have people who are open and talking to us. So that's really important. Oh, Pete, it's just been cool. I just kind of want to signpost people to where they could contact you if they wanted to talk more about what you're doing, because you do have this unique workforce. I think people could learn a lot from your organisation. You're very proactive. You're definitely not passive in terms of L&D, or actually putting yourselves out there to build trust with the employees to become an employer of choice. And I know that experience will be valuable to the listeners. Where could people find you?
They can find me at one of 13 Oxygen Activeplay parks in the country. I'm always open to meet people for a cup of coffee and a great bit of cake. Any of our parks. I'm on LinkedIn. That's how you and I met all those years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, please find me on LinkedIn, or I'm more than happy for you to put my email address in any communication that's going out. And I'm always happy to hear from people and have those shared experiences and learnings and see what we can learn from each other. So
amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. You are a pivot leader in my eyes. My heart goes to you. Honestly, the work that you do is absolutely super, and I'm totally inspired by you. So thank you very much for your time today. And I know our listeners would have loved everything you've talked about. Thanks, Pete.
No, thanks very much, Emma.
Thank you for listening to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. For any information on anything we've discussed in this episode, head down to the show notes. You'll also find my Pivot scorecard there, so you can take the test and see what your Pivot score is right now. Don't forget to like, rate and share the podcast, and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any future episodes.